This is Jenny Kunkel, and in this video we're going to go ahead and cover the basics of stored procedures in SQL Server. And if you think about a stored procedure, it's going to be a bit of code, a script that you put together that you can provide input values to. You can get values returned from it. If you don't do that, it's going to return the record set from an executed query if you're just doing some type of a select. But it is a bit of code that you can store in the database and then call it to run whenever you want. You don't necessarily have to open up a script file and rerun it. Once it's stored in the database, you can just execute it from the database. So let's go ahead and let's open a new query window, and we're going to start pretty simple. And we are going to do this against the Northwinds database. So we're going to use our use statement to actually direct it to that database. We also want to put a drop statement in to drop the procedure if it exists, because we're going to be making modifications to it. So it makes sense that we go ahead and add that at the beginning. And then when we need to go through the second time that we run it, it's not going to necessarily fail for us. So we can always put in a drop procedure. We can always abbreviate it to proc as well. And we can say if exists, and this is going to be the name of our procedure. And we are going to name this SP get company total sales for year. This is what we're going to strive for. Initially, it's not going to be quite this. We're going to get back some information, and we'll be changing the query a little bit later. So in this case, we need to put the drop statement in a batch. So we're going to add the go, and then we can go ahead and create our procedure. So we're going to create proc, and this is going to essentially be the procedure name that we defined above, the SP get company total sales for year. And then if we had input parameters, and we'll worry about those later, we would put those. And then after we get done with input parameters and output parameters, then we would go ahead and specify an as. And at that point, we are ready to write the body, essentially, of that procedure, what it's actually going to do. And in the first case, we're just going to write a select statement, and that's going to be what gets returned from the database. So this is going to be select c.company name, comma, date part. And this is going to be year, and we are doing this on o.order date. And this is going to return to us the order year. Then we have our d.unit price times our d.quantity times, and let's go ahead and move this to the next line before it gets too long. And this is going to be 1 minus d.discount. And we're going to give this as the extended price. We're going to select this from the orders table, and we're going to alias it as O, and then go ahead and do an inner join on customers C, and this is going to be on the C.customer ID equal to the O.customer ID. And we're going to inner join this one more time. And this is going to be on our order details. We'll call this D. And this is going to be on D.order ID equal to O.order ID. That's going to be our initial query that we're going to start with. And this is essentially our procedure to start. Now, because we have a create, we have to put in a go before we could actually think about executing our stored procedure. When we execute our stored procedure, we are going to use the exec, short for execute. I could go through and type out execute, but that's not required. And then I can go ahead and do my SP get total sales for the year and execute that. when I run the procedure, if I go ahead and just run in the procedure, that's going to essentially not bring back anything. But when I actually go ahead and execute that stored procedure, it's going out to the database, finding that stored procedure, and then running it. And that's going to show us the results there. Now, if we go ahead and look within our SQL Server Management Studio, if we go to the Programmability folder and go into the Stored Procedures, we should be able to see that it has our stored procedures stored there. We see that we don't have any input. Now, the next thing that we want to do is take it a little step closer, and in this case, we want to go ahead and we want to add our year, and we also want to add the company name to qualify our query by, and then be able to return the total sales for the year for that company. So let's go ahead and let's modify this query. First of all, we're going to remove the company name. We're going to remove the order date, and we're going to change this to a sum. And we no longer need to actually do the extended price because we're not going to be returning a select statement result. We're going to be returning a scalar value from this procedure, and we are going to then add our where clause here. So this is going to be where our c.company name is going to be equal to our parameter coming in, and this is going to be where we specify our parameters, and I'm going to specify the @company name, and this is going to be defined as nvarchar 40. And then I'm also going to be defining my year, and this is going to be an integer. So then we have our parameters coming in, and I can qualify this by that @company name that was being passed in, and that's going to be the date part of year for our o.order date, and we're going to set that equal to our @year that's being passed in. In this case, we want the sum to be returned, so we can go ahead and declare @total sales as money, and then we want to go ahead and select the sum into our total sales. But we're still not done because we have nothing being returned at this point. If we would run it, it would not show us anything. Let's go ahead and let's actually do a return statement here. And when we do the return, we're just going to return our total sales. And if we come down here, we have a couple things that we need to do. Let's go ahead and set up our variable that we are going to essentially receive the total back, and we'll call this @sales total. This is going to be defined as money. We also are going to declare our input so that we can reuse it not only to pass it in, but then also in a print statement without hard coding the values multiple times. And this is going to be first our @year. And we'll set this as an int and set it equal to an initial value of 1998. Then we're going to declare our @company name. That's going to be an nvarchar 40. And we're going to set that equal to an initial value of Rancho Grande as the company name. And then when I am executing this, I need to go ahead and specify my variable that I'm receiving the contents back in, and this is going to be my @sales total. We're going to set this equal to our stored procedure, and we need to provide the parameters, and this is going to be the @company name, comma, @year. And once we have that coded, we can go ahead and print out something, and let's go ahead and do a print and say sales total for, and at this point we want to have the year, so we're going to do a convert of our year to varchar. So this is going to be at year. Better put in the plus sign. Then I can go ahead and put in another space for space plus, go to the next line, and this is where I'm going to put in my company name. Then quote is space quote plus, and then we're going to convert our sales total to varchar, and this is going to be at sales total, and we're going to use 1 so that it puts in comments so we can read the value just a little bit better. So at this point, we've gone through and declared our values down here that we're going to use to actually run the procedure. So we can always just go ahead and select everything and execute it, and it's going to show us that the sales total for 1998 for Rancho Grande is 1695.00. Now, if we go ahead and change this, because right now we've used our input parameters and we're returning a value, but if instead of using an input parameter with an output parameter, and when we're using an output parameter, this return works fine if we have one field that we need to output, but if we have more than one field that we need to output, we need to specify it in the header of the procedure, and this is going to be where it actually gets added, and we can have multiples for output. So we're going to change it up so that we're at least going to return it as the output. So we're going to comment out our return statement, and we're going to add our @ total sales as money, and because we want to output it, we specify that it's going to be output. Then we need to remove our declaration here so we can comment that out. And once we do that, after we put a comma in after our year, it should start resolving everything. Now, as we go down to the bottom, this is not going to work. We need to go ahead and change this up. And after our year, then we need to pass in our @ sales total so it can update it. And this we need to specify as output. So if we had more than one that we were going to essentially get values back from, we would have multiple outputs. And it doesn't really matter what the orders of these are as far as the parameters. I always find that it's a little easier to have all of the input together and then have all the outputs together, but it doesn't necessarily have to be that way. So I can go ahead and at this point execute everything, and I should get the very same value because the query hasn't changed. It's just the method of returning that value. So we've taken a look at stored procedures. We've looked with a stored procedure where it doesn't have any return and it's just returning whatever is that select statement. We've also looked at how we can return a value using a return statement, and then also how we can return a value using the output with other parameters as well for input.